Welcome everyone that's listening online. I'm Sadie Ward. If you've been listening to some of the Green Theater sessions, if you've been following along, you've probably gotten used to seeing a PowerPoint structure as part of these presentations. For this topic, DEI, the intersectionality of DEI and sustainability, I wanted a more conversational approach because I feel like there's a lot of aspects around DEI and then sustainability that couldn't quite be captured in a PowerPoint presentation. So this conversation will be a little bit, well, it will be a conversation, right? It's not so much a PowerPoint. So for those that are following, it'll be a slightly different format than what you've seen. I'm very lucky to have two of some of my favorite collaborators in Minneapolis on the call with me. We've got Alejandro Tay and MJ Leffler. Would you both like to give a little introduction on who you are before we get started?
Sure. I'm Alejandro, he, him pronouns. I'm the Associate Artistic Director at Mixed Blood Theater.
Okay.
And I'm MJ Leffler. I use they and he pronouns, and I'm the events production manager over at the Guthrie.
Great. And for those that don't know, I consider Alejandro and MJ to be um, some collaborators on sustainability work that has happened in Minneapolis. MJ was part of the first iteration of developing this multi-part training series with Theater Pro Rata. So MJ has kind of seen the arc and the development of this training series over almost a 2 year period at this time. And then
Yeah.
Alejandro and I were able to design what I consider to be one of the most sustainability forward shows that I've been able to work on to this date. So I'm very excited that we get to talk about this. Um, so we're gonna start with, I've got some questions just to kind of keep the conversation going and just have some structure to it, but it'll be somewhat fluid. So we're gonna start with just some kind of basic questions just to get conversation going. So given that this is an intersectional topic, I want to first kind of focus on how do we define diversity, equity, inclusion, and then how do we define sustainability? So we kind of establish some of those key principles first, and then we can start to get into some nuance as well. So knowing that DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion is really only 3 words. It is so much more all-encompassing than that. There's uh, so many additional words that can be included with that. So, Alejandro or MJ, whoever wants to start, how do you define diversity, equity, and inclusion? And it could be other words in addition to or beyond DEI. That's just kind of the phrase that we've gotten used to with the media the last couple years. So.
Um, well, I think that it's so hard to define. Like you can try and look up a Google definition or whatever. And a lot of people attempt to put it in a box so that they have a clear definition of it. Um, I think that the reality is that it's an ongoing journey and that everybody is at a different state and different phase, and it means something different to any individual person. Um, you know, and if you even break it down further than that, I think the diversity aspect of it and also inclusion aspect of it and accessibility needs and all of that, they all mean different things to individual people as well. So for me, I think both diversity, equity, and inclusion and sustainability are about boundaries and barriers and breaking those down and giving some flexibility where there's traditionally not flexibility, and all of the boundaries that have been placed on us by years and years of oppression and people trying to put things in boxes, opening those lenses back up to see that things don't always have to be so narrow. And I think that is why I think these two things have a lot of intersectionality, because both of them, if you look at it with that lens, they are very similar.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm so happy to be in this conversation with y'all. You're brilliant. I'm glad to meet you, MJ. I parallel a lot of what MJ just said, and I think for me, um, A. I am also on a journey, so I'm also coming in here not as expert, but also a practitioner in the very like practice part. I'm practicing, figuring it out. I think for me, it's about having an awareness and understanding of the history and power structures that have led us to make the decisions that we make. And I think especially in theater, we love our traditions, we love our rituals, we love our traditions, and like any institution that bases itself on tradition and rituals, it's I think very healthy to question all of those and to see, who is that excluding or prioritizing uh when you make those rituals or those languages a part of the practice of putting on that art. Um, I think a lot about like uh the the good of creative constraints, and how if we are making decisions from a place of wanting to undo some of those harms or undo some of those barriers, it leads us to actually really interesting decisions, and creative decisions that get us to places that we wouldn't otherwise. And for me, I think especially in a collaborative field, um, getting a diversity of opinions, perspectives, points of view can only improve the art. And like, yeah, and that will also carry over into almost any other field. But like that's the importance of it. So if you gave the definition, like I think the value, the importance of it is you're going to make your art stronger, you're going to make your institutions stronger, if you are looking at how and why people have been left out and actively seeking to improve access.
Those are
Absolutely.
both such great definitions. And MJ, you're kind of that kind of narrow lens kind of description that you just described makes me think of like how DEI has also been a journey in my life because there's been like, I am formally on the DEI committee at work in almost every job I've been in, right? Like there is that very formal, like, this is institutionally how we define DEI. And that is like one hat of DEI that I think, particularly in the media, gets certain kind of stigmas to it. But then there's like this other side of like, how are you approaching the world? Like, how are you handling difference? And like, are you comfortable or uncomfortable with that? Like, to me, there's like these different like ends of the spectrum of like, how much are we trying to like fit it into a box so we can check it off? Because I feel like so many times people like look at their to-do list and then like DEI is at the bottom. But it's like, but you should really be looking at like your whole to-do list and how you're approaching things with a DEI lens. It's not just another item on your to-do list. So,
That's a
yes.
really, it's a funny thing to think about in the context of Mixed Blood's work. So Mixed Blood for folks out there is we just celebrated our 50th anniversary, 50-year-old theater company in Minneapolis. Was literally started to sort of celebrate racial difference and like bring together folks across difference, whether that be racial ability, gender, age, language, etc., and come out stronger for having convened, is sort of the theory there. To disrupt injustice, and build community is the mission. And so it's really funny when folks start talking about DEI programs, and it's like, well, we don't have a DEI program. We kind of are a DEI program. Uh, it's like that's kind of the point. So yeah, it's also like you're saying, it's like the framework from which you make decisions rather than
Mhm.
this siloed off thing in the corner.
Yeah, framework I think is a really great way to phrase that. That's a great kind of way to say that. Um, and then now kind of like the other side of my question, how do you define sustainability?
I think a lot of what you were just saying was the perfect segue of like,
Hmm.
if you think about EDI with a sustainability lens, it's not a thing that fits in a box and you can check off and it's done. The work is never done. And so you have to find a way to continue that work with a sustainability lens and practice. And that's anything from like material state sustainability and also person sustainability. And
Hmm.
how are we sustaining ourselves to continue that work? How are we growing our own narrow lenses to be wider so that we are better people and we are upholding more of our community? And when we are doing those things, we are sustaining our art form, our practice. We're including more people. We're telling broader stories. And so those two things really fit together. And if you have one without the other, you're doing an injustice to either or.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, not it's like not too long ago, if you had said sustainability, especially for theaters, it would have meant like building audiences. How do we continue to function?
Continue.
How do
Yeah.
we sustain ourselves? Right. But there's something, and working with you, Sadie, really has been a lot of my journey on this of thinking about the broader systems that
Yes.
the making of theater feeds into. And it's like, how is this sustainable across a longer arc and across multiple sectors, not just how do we keep our theater doors open?
Right.
So that really has been the change in that definition for me.
Yeah, I think that whole like once you can start thinking about things in that like system thinking lens, I think it just kind of helps you like step out and be like, wait, is this sustainable? Like, can we sustain this? Because like I know that I frequently, when I am like in my own like thought circles, being like, wait, what is sustainable? Is this sustainable? Can I sustain this? I always go back to the Brundtland Commission definition of sustainability, which is sustainability is meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And it's so succinct, but like whenever I say that, I'm always like, well, of course I want future generations to keep making theater, so I can't do these things that like harm the environment to make it harder for humans to live, and then because it's harder to live, we can't make as much like art and theater, right? Like that just makes me sad to think that like people in the future just won't be able to do theater in the same way or like to the same level of enjoyment. And that thought kind of like varies and rolls around in my head in different ways. But that always kind of grounds me because theater is such a like person to person kind of learning experience. Like it's so collaborative, but you also like genuinely have like been mentored by someone. So it's like you always have to be thinking of like the next generation when you're thinking of these things as well. So, yeah. So we've kind of talked a little bit about how these topics are intersectional, because like part of the reason that I'm very interested in exploring this intersectionality is I like very frequently have people tell me like I get DEI and I get sustainability, but I just like I don't understand how they're related. Like I think that those are two totally different things. So I'm curious, like, did you ever have like a specific moment where you realized that like sustainability and DEI are interconnected in that way? Like, was it kind of like a light switch or a light bulb moment for you that you had like a specific instance? Or was it something that you just kind of gradually developed over time, kind of like that awareness of that association?
I will offer that I feel like I understood the rumblings of it um, before COVID hit, but going through COVID and coming out of COVID, I think people were looking at sustainability in much different ways and what it means to be sustainable and like how you bring things back online so that they don't come on and then crash. But keeping them in a forward trajectory. Um, and in reevaluating that, I started to look at how sustainability lives in many different areas of life, and in many different areas of theater specifically. And boy, uh, Alejandro, you spoke earlier about like sustainability of audience. And if we don't think about who is coming to see the story and what stories we're putting on and the community that we're serving, sustainability in a budgetary sense and like what we're building the sets out of doesn't actually matter. You know, if nobody comes to see the show, it doesn't matter how much beautiful paint is on stage. No one cares. And so it really started to leak down into more everyday practice for me. Um, and I think that the out of EDI, the accessibility component of it for me was the thing that really hit the nail on the head. Like being an events person and putting on all different kinds of events within the Guthrie, um, making sure that things had an accessibility lens so that we could make the money that we needed to in order to program other things and like funneling around the traditional sustainability helped me to reframe how it's not just a budgetary monetary aspect.
Mhm. Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, um, I I am thinking back to so when we were working on Upstream, so this is this project that Sadie you referenced, that was not only so the content of the show was about um simultaneously educating students and families around climate change, but also giving like direct opportunities for those audiences to practice having hard conversations around climate change. So in the event itself, um, audiences would help characters come up with solutions or ways to talk about things with people in their lives, etc. And these were all kind of like practice for life outside beyond the theater. And one of the things that we talked about a lot was, the Sadie, you're going to remember this better because you put it so much better, but that the materials and the design are the story. Like the way that we make it and what we make it out of, that is the story itself. Like that is the narrative. And I think that applies to so much more than just the design, right? Like how we chose to work on that event was also collaborative with students and teachers and adults working intergenerationally. Working across differences of socioeconomics and race and whatnot to craft that story, that then was also being engaged with by an audience that was curated in a specific way, right? Or I'm thinking to another project that we did early on in Mark Valdez's tenure, so around 2022 2023, that was with uh, artists with disabilities. And the person leading that, shout out to Alison Berglund Johnson, the artist leading that process, but she really was like, if we're serious about having artists with disabilities create this work, then these are the ways that we're going to operate. Just period. Like this is how we're going to structure this. How we do it, how we set up the process, is the story, is the narrative, and is the event. And it carries over. Um, and so when I'm thinking about the intersections between those two things. For me, it's that. It's like the care and thoughtfulness around, again, those power structures and histories and larger systems at play, and how do they feed into and how can you disrupt maybe some of the things that are either barring access or making less than ideal you know issues of waste and whatnot. Um, yeah, that's what I got.
Yeah. I know for myself, it feels like there's like subsequent layers of like realization, like even on my own like sustainability journey. Because I remember like one of the first thoughts was the like kind of like what we've been talking about of like, can you attract audiences? And like having worked in HR previously, it's kind of like, well, if you don't treat people well, in like the simplest way you can say this, if you can't treat people well, they will not come back, whether it's audience or artists, right? And so that was like kind of like that baseline realization of like, well, yes, you have to be inclusive. So then when you start to think of like treating people well in like a direct and an indirect way, you start to like expand that level of thinking to like, yes, there's the like people in your production or your organization, but then when you start throwing things out, it's like that's impacting someone over there. That's not treating someone well. And then it was like when when I realized that there was like an official term of environmental social justice, I was like, oh my gosh,
There it
this is a
is.
thing that is this is an idea that's been rolling around in my head. And like watching the different videos. I think for myself, I can also kind of look at back to the pandemic and kind of like bookmark that as like a period of time of reflection in my life, right? Because there's time to reflect back then of like, because part of like in the pandemic, I was almost like to a point where it's like, maybe I don't want to do theater if I know that it's like
Yeah.
generating this much waste and like having this kind of impact because it's again getting back to system thinking, it's like is that a system I really want to like be participating in,
Yeah.
right? Because it's like you can see the system and be like you can be in the system or you can be out of the system, right? And I like had this like realization like as like groups were coming together to form next stage, it's like oh I don't need to like say no to theater, I can say this is how I'm going to do theater, right? I'm going to choose to do it this way. And that was like very empowering at the same time too, to realize
And
like I can like choose this path. I can just say I'm not doing it that way
that
anymore.
way.
and it gets to MJ's point about sustainability in the sense of like individuals, like what how can I sustain this for myself, for my like body and
Hmm.
mind and soul, right? It's like no one person can do everything, right? It's impossible. But if you're able to recognize where you do have power to make that choice for yourself or for an organization that you're working in, like where do you have the ability to choose one thing to do and to try and do well? If there's anything that I took away from that upstream process, it really is like the toxic impulse in me to be like need to do all of it at once at the same time, and it's like that's just not gonna ever be good for anybody. Like that's not it's not sustainable. And so it's like instead of trying to do 8 million things poorly, it's like picking the one or two and then trying to do them really well. um
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, that's
Sadie,
definitely
some of
part of it.
the work that you did with us with Prorata was very much like you can't do everything. You're not going to do
Hmm.
everything well and correct. And it's actually harmful to people when you attempt to do it all and then you're only doing it at 20% or 40% or whatever. You should really define for yourself here are the handful of things that I'm going to try and focus on. And if I can do those really well, I can stand by those as my compass of integrity. And then I can tell people like the others are a thing that we are working on. We're working at crafting this so that this is better. And that is what we can control. And we are trying to control as much of it as possible. And yes, that means that some things are not perfect and some things are going to fall through the cracks and some things are going to be forgotten and be messy and whatever. But like, that's the journey we're on together. And this is the portion of it that I feel like I am able to handle. And that's a sustainability thing for me and for the people around me and my team. Um, as somebody who supervises others, I try really hard to like, this is the, two or three things that I can do on a call to make sure that everyone knows each other. Everyone knows each other's pronouns. Everyone knows my pronouns and where to find me and how to, connect with me if they feel uncomfortable and where safe spaces are. And then like if somebody gets lost in the building, that's a thing. But these are the things that I can control and I can make sure happen every time I am with a group of people that are new to each other and new to me. Um,
Mhm.
and even just defining that for ourselves, I have found really helpful. And definitely the work that I have done with you and listened to you do over the last 2 years has helped to like just readjust that for me.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, you say the word perfect, and that's like one of those words where I'm like, perfectionism. The
Yeah.
the word that makes us all miserable and makes us buy many things off Amazon. Like yeah, this like perception of like what something should be is like part of what we're fighting to be like, but what are we trying to accomplish? What actually is sustainable? How are we actually impacting people? Our perception of perfection is one thing, like that's over there, and that's what the system wants us to think. But what can we actually do over here? But yeah, so the
And when you let it
perfectionism
go, it
is
gets better. It gets better. It
It
always
gets
gets
better.
better. And you're
Mhm.
like, well, we're not going to do that, but what can we do instead with what we have? It's like it's going to be way better.
Yeah, when you step away from scarcity thinking, it actually opens up your creative process quite a bit. So, um, one question that I have kind of as part of my lineup here is, what role does theater and art have in relation to the intersectionality of DEI and sustainability? Um, this question, I always think of back to Upstream, Alejandro, when you mentioned that like there's a lot of solutions that science has found, right? There's many like ways to like identify the problem and be like, we can solve it this way, but it's getting people to care and like pay attention that is like to me part of storytelling. And
I
that was just
hope.
like that was like one of my big takeaways from Upstream. So I'm very biased in this question, but like, what role do you think artists like art and theater plays in this conversation of in storytelling?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's also hope too, because I think
Mm,
especially in your more like liberal spaces, right? Like fo folks who should be allies to the point of like we should be, relying on you to help us do this work are not doing that work because there's there's a nihilism. There's a like, well, it doesn't matter. The system is too big. I have no effect on it. Nothing that I do will make a difference ultimately. And so it doesn't matter. The systems are too strong. The folks who are pushing against are too powerful. And it's like that's the thing to interrupt. That's the mode to be like, wait, well, actually, like if we are working together, like we do have so much more power. And to MJ, you were talking about like, oh, I come into a room, I make sure everyone knows each other. I make sure everyone like that's huge. And that I think is the other piece of it that I think theater does and can do especially well if we leverage it is just connecting people to people. I mean, we've seen it now in these days, right? Like folks, there are certain federal agents right now in our cities who are shocked to see how quickly Minneapolis and St. Paul and the rest have organized. It's like, are they paid agitators? No, they just know each other. They're just connected to each other. Like these are like neighbors who care about each other. And it's like when we're working together, it's, yeah, it's gonna be messy, but so much can actually get done so quickly if we each are willing to like shoulder a little bit of it and stay in communication with each other and move together.
Mhm. Yeah. Kind of one thing that when you mention like we look around and, suddenly there's many federal agents in our city. The thing I've also been thinking of kind of in relation to like what role does art play in this is like how fast we can start to make change happen too.
Mm.
Because I think that there's lots of times that it like kind of like what you just said, it's like the system's too big, change is too hard, but like having lived through like 2020 with like the pandemic and the uprising, and now having lived through this experience, I'm like, we have in fact shown that humans can just like change their behavior immediately. So like that kind of like interrupting and disrupting, kind of mentality. I'm like, I, I've seen it a lot at this point in my life. Like we can just decide to change and we can like make that happen. And I think that that's pretty true with our art and our theater as well. Is like we can just decide to
But you
start
have to
doing
let
things
go. You
differently.
have to let go of a lot. You have to let go of, like you're saying, that the idea of what it needs to be or what it should be, this like traditional idea. It's like if you're going with that model, like it takes a long time and it moves real slow, and like getting a show up off it's like years in the making, and some beautiful beautiful stuff can come up out of that. But I also look to organizing movements. We're doing work right now that is based directly off of, like, the Teatro Campesino actos, right? And it's like those were like, how quick can we get this onto the picket lines? Like how simple can we make this so that it can pop up anywhere? How, the models are out there. It doesn't even need to be invented. It's just like choose to pick that up and carry
Mhm.
it forward.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, we did an event just a few weekends ago, Stories for Indigenous Resilience with Mini Gizik Theater Company. Um, and they were very upfront with us that, like, we're going to curate a group of artists. Those artists are going to arrive. They're going to tell some stories. And that was like the information we got in advance. And on the night of, it was very messy. Like microphones didn't work. People were throwing PowerPoint at me and, trying to navigate like editing things together in the moment that we're supposed to open house. But also, the community came together and it was so much more about being in space with each other and supporting each other and hearing each other's needs and having reaction to those needs and supporting the artists as they tell their story, that none of that should and technical preciseness and like things that we think need to be a polished product for a production or an event or a thing that we want to host, like all of that, decades of learning that, these are the rules that you have to follow, just fell away. And it was one of the most beautiful things that I've been in the room for. um and I think that if we let some of our brain just reprogram to the fact that it is more about the story and the people and the community space that we share with each other, that all of that other stuff will fall into place in the way that it needs to and doesn't actually have to be dialed in to this like preciseness and perfection and the shoulds that we think that it should be.
Mhm.
I've had this experience quite a bit lately where I'm almost let down. I'm almost disappointed when I'm at like a really polished, clean, like virtuosic performance. I'm like, oh, but we didn't experience this live together. You know what I mean? It would have been the same thing if I was just like watching it on a screen, if I was doing, like National Theater Live or something. It's like, where's that real element of like we're people in this together,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
I'm hungry for it. I'm especially now, I'm like, I can flip on a thing at any moment. But if I'm gonna take time to actually like gather in space with people and breathe the same air. Like I want to actually be with you, present with you in the room.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
think when we
Yeah.
talk about sustainability specifically, um, risk and risk evaluation of like what is going to bring an audience, what is going to make the money so that we can do another show, and programming of what we're, programming for next season. That risk evaluation is also driving, I don't know, I'm seeing less risky shit at places that have the money to do risky shit, and more risky stuff. One of the most risky things I've seen lately actually was at Mixed Blood. I came to see Third Space Theater do their lovely, weird, like, uh, I was sitting there for full portions of it, being like, what the hell is happening on stage right now? But it was so beautiful. I laughed, I cried, I was there with people that I enjoyed. I got to hug people that I hadn't seen in a while. And like walking away from it, I don't even know that I remember what the name of the show was. Plainham. There we go. It
Yeah.
just came to mind.
Yeah.
But it was risky in all of the good ways, and it didn't focus on those things that um I don't know, that models of teaching and collegiate theater push you to do.
I
Mhm.
also think that um and this is something that my mentors kind of like carry a torch for really, like, your Michael Rhodes and your Mark Valdez's of the world, right? But it's like the tools and techniques of theater have such value to civic society beyond putting on a play, right?
Yes.
So recently, and I swear I'll bring this back around to DEI and sustainability, but recently, we were at some Know Your Rights um trainings, and it was lovely and it was so important, it was so valuable, but it was a PowerPoint. It was a PowerPoint presentation that was not the most engaging even. And me and my colleague Tolu were there, and we debriefed afterwards, and we were like, oh, like, is this what we need to be doing? Like, we are the theater, but we are the people who can help make this material sink in better. Like, we have the skills. We went to school for this, damn it. Um, and so, cut to uh tonight as we speak, there are mixed blood trainings happening at the Guthrie
At
that
the
that
Guthrie.
are like participatory and interactive, and are using the skills of theater to do a not theater thing. I mean, it's theater in that, like, there's a performer, we had a rehearsal, but that's it. It's essentially, a very interactive and participatory training and practice for real life. And I think about how we can broaden our understanding of our skills and what they're for and what use they have to society beyond just putting on a play. It doesn't mean we should stop doing plays. I love plays. We should keep doing plays, but also like where I think we are also called for so much more, and we have and these skills that we have developed have use outside of our physical theater spaces. Um, and so when you put that in conversation with DEI and sustainability, like you asked, what is the role of theater? And maybe I would reframe it as not what is the role of theater, but what is the role of theater practitioners, of theater makers
Mhm.
in DEI and sustainability. Because if we keep it isolated to just, like, the theater industry is just a tiny piece of the puzzle, a very tiny, an increasingly small piece of the puzzle, actually. But people with those skills and with that knowledge and with that training are useful in such a wide variety of spheres. And so I'm thinking also about, if you're not someone who necessarily thinks about, like, oh, how I can volunteer, or if I do volunteer, but I'm doing this other thing, and it's like, but I also have an incredible trained speaking voice and ability to be on a stage. It's like, then go up, like, volunteer to give that speech, because that other guy who's come up with the strategy might have come up with a great strategy, but should not be the one on mic, right? Like, it's like all of these things. Like, that's a specific example, but you know what I mean? It's like, just get in it, get involved.
Well, and that's a pretty great segue because I had one question being like, what role does theater and art play? And then I had another question of like, why do artists and theater makers need to care about the intersectionality of DEI and sustainability? And you jumped right to it, right? Because it is that idea of like we have these skills that make these topics so engaging, right? And I think part of it is also like humanizing these like very large concepts, right? Like it's very common that like I start talking to people about sustainability and I can just kind of see them like their bodies stiffen and recede and they're just like I touched plastic today and I'm like that's not the point. Like I'm not trying to overwhelm or scare you away from this. Like what I'm trying to do is humanize it, right? Because if you care about the planet, you're going to behave differently, right? If you are thinking of like the system of like just because I put it in the trash can, what is the system that's taking it away from me? It's like getting other people to start to question as well. So thanks for that segue into
Also,
this
like
question of
there's also a reason, right, why like every politician, no matter what your stripe or color, will be telling anecdotes and stories, right? Because it's
Mhm,
like the stats are not ultimately going to compel the most people. It's going to be finding some kind of personal connection, either to draw your sympathy or your rage or your curiosity or inspire hope or inspire fear or whatever it is, something that plays on your emotions is what moves people to action or inaction, right? Like that is
mhm,
the thing. And that's what we do. That's exactly what we do.
What we do.
mhm, mhm. MJ, do you have any comments or commentary around like why should artists and theater makers care about sustainability and DEI?
Well, I think when we talk about uh, sustainability, like it is our job to sustain this art form and this craft into the future. And if we uh, if we don't, then our stories are going to die with us, right? Um, and so I think about all the work that I do at work and as a theater practitioner, and the skills that it has helped me form about like how to be personable, how to be empathetic, how to recognize emotion in others, and how to communicate. Um, and I turn around and I use that like every day when I'm teaching my 3-year-old how to process his own emotions and how to be a better person in the world around him. And it's about making the world better for him, but also making him better for the world. And like you do that on so many different levels. And teaching him how to be empathetic to others and consider others and include others and you know make things about the world around him, it'll help him in the future as well. So that model of sustainability, like we pass that down, we pass those knowledge pieces down, we pass those stories down, and all of that fits together. Um, and so when I think about myself as a practitioner, it's like, what stories do I expose him to? What books do I read to him? We have one of his favorite books is actually The ABCs of Equality. And we read it all the time. And it's like, right now, concepts that are he's not going to fully understand, but he can also point to a picture and he knows that that is an idea that we're talking about. And I hope that that helps him grow into a better person. So, um, theater forms everything I do on a daily basis, like not just the artwork that I do when I'm in the building or the spreadsheets that I do when I'm communicating with people at work or helping the stories on the stage come to life. It's also like how I interact with other people and how I parent and how I am a child to my parents and how I interact with the people in my life. Um,
Mhm.
yeah,
Mhm. That's great. Um, the next question that I've written out to kind of just keep our conversation going. Do you have any resources that you would recommend to someone if they want to learn more either about DEI, the umbrella that is diversity, equity, and inclusion, or learn more about sustainability and how to incorporate that into their life or their theater practice? Any resources that come to mind?
So as I understand it, there's this really cool maker named Sadie Ward who's been working on these like green theater trainings, and they're accessible and you can go through them like a course. They're very, very cool. You should check them
has
out.
recordings you can listen to.
There are six other ones prior to this one. True story. Yes.
Yeah, but also, well, it's so silly, right? Because if someone's listening to this, they already know about things like Next Stage and all of the other, work you've built out. But just like those systems that you can plug into as theater makers that mean you get to expand your options beyond like dump everything at the end of a show. Like strike goes directly to landfill. Like, let us think about that for a moment. Let's pause and consider other options.
Mhm.
I guess I would encourage people, um, like it's not even looking at the strike of a show, but it's starting with the design of a show, starting with
Mhm.
the casting of a show, starting like it starts much earlier than the actual product that is on stage. Um, because if you can design a set with sustainability in mind, Sadie, you are an incredible ambassador for this. Like using recycled materials, but also forming your design to include things that either already exist or, I'm going to modulate the idea that I have as a designer to look differently because I know there's a thing out there that I can repurpose or reuse or whatever. And I think that uh, creates better artists when you can be flexible and you can interpret things in a wider sense. Um, and that also allows things to then not end up in landfills, but like use a rental center or use a thing that is not a traditional theater piece, but maybe has a home or could be whatever, turn into a piece of furniture for somebody else.
Or even just like simple creative constraints. We were talking about creative constraints earlier, and like you're talking about designing with sustainability in mind, and thinking that that could be as simple as as a first step, being like, okay, hey y'all, for this production, like we're not going to order anything off of Amazon. That's our creative constraint, right?
Yes.
Just that. Like let's start there, right? And whatever else happens happens, but it's like we've given ourselves one creative constraint. And then it's like, hey y'all, like the big creative constraint with upstream was like how can we, mostly Sadie, realistically. But how do we think about the continued life of this beyond
Mhm.
this production? Not only where is it coming from, but where is it going to? And making that really intentional and visible, right? Like, and I think that we had some mixed success with this, but also like telling the story of that. So that way that becomes legible in a way to other folks who might want to do the same thing. It's like, here was our
Mhm.
process to do that because we already have inherited all of these processes that may not be serving us, frankly, right now.
Mhm.
And then the similar to DEI, right? Like we were thinking about designing with that in mind. I think a lot about, when I came to Mixed Blood, one of the things that I sort of inherited joining the company was like, okay, every single one of our productions is open captioned. Like every performance in the Firehouse is open captioned, period. Like we've just committed to doing that, which means that we can plan for it in a different way. We can design for it in a different way. The captions can be like, but it can be part of the set. It can be, we can get creative and interesting and weird with it, right? And it allows folks to access the show in a different way, and it brings people in on the design team. It means that we're hiring a captions operator and a captions creator, right? So it's like it's creating that position on the team. But just thinking about like who also related but separate note, but like who's making decisions and who is questioning those decisions, and do you have like a healthy model within the structure of your organization and like decision making ability for like who's calling out, right? Because I think DEI especially and sustainability both feel tacked on when it's like the thing we have to contend with after the fact versus the thing that someone is keeping track of. If not everyone, like it should be like an organization-wide framework that we're all working under. But if not, at the very least, like who is making decisions and who's calling out those decisions or questioning or like just like introducing complications or provocations or interesting questions in that decision-making process as you go. So that was a lot to process, but you're giving me good questions. So
So we've got about 5 minutes left. I had like zero doubt that we would be able to fill an hour, just knowing the smart humans that are here. Do you have any other kind of like closing thoughts to kind of wrap up our time together, just around, again, that intersectionality of sustainability and DEI that you feel like we maybe haven't talked about yet?
I wanna revise an earlier answer. So you had asked us the question earlier of like where is the intersection or how are these things related? And
Mhm.
like making that visible to folks who think that these are in separate buckets. And I do think that there's something about both DEI and sustainability that is about understanding and acknowledging our inherent interconnectedness. That like
Mhm.
the things that I do, the decisions I make, the privileges I benefit from, or the structures that keep me tied down are directly related to someone else's decisions
Mhm.
or are causing obstacles for someone else, right? Like there's that aspect. And then in the sustainability conversation, it's exactly the same. One of the reasons
Mhm.
why climate resilience is one of like the main pillars of Mixed Blood's work is because we see over and over and over again that those most affected by climate change are folks who are on the margins in so many other ways and in so many other identities, right? And those that is by design. Like that's a system that is working very well for a specific few. And so being aware of that and like the interconnectedness of all of that means that like once you start picking at one thread, it all starts to unravel. Um,
Mhm.
Uh, yes, I agree wholeheartedly with um, the way that those things meet each other and intertwine with each other. And, you know, I guess I would just encourage people that think that they are separate to like write a question that you would ask about EDI specifically, and then just ask the same question about sustainability and see how closely your answers match each other and where the differences are. And if you take those differences and you try and apply them across the aisle, I bet that you would learn um, more about each of them.
Those are both great answers, so I'm glad I asked that question. Well, we're pretty much at an hour, so I want to thank both of you for your time, to, chat about the intersectionality of DEI and sustainability. And thanks to everyone that listened, and stay tuned for more episodes. Thanks, everyone.